Genuinely, why do you go to a store? Why do you go to a store? Why do you go to... We're not going to count like food or anything like that. We're going to talk bookstore. Okay, we'll just use that. Why do you go to a bookstore? Do you just rent a book? Do you go to read books there? Or do you go there to buy a book? What happens if you go and buy said book and you go back home? And say, for instance, you buy the entire Witcher series because Witcher originally stemmed from a book. So you go out and, because, yeah, you'll see what I'm talking about. You go out and you buy the entire Witcher series. You bring it home. Imagine if the co-founder or the publisher behind those books was like, you know what? We don't want to support these books anymore, so they just come inside your home after purchasing those books, and they just take those books. They come and kick down your door, or basically they knock on your door and they say, hey, by the way, we need those back. Like, why? Why, sir? Oh, we don't support them anymore. We need them back. So imagine that. Imagine how illegal that would be, for the publisher to like come up to your own home, come to your own home, knock on your door, or walk inside your own home and take the books back that you purchased. Think about it. It's because of control. Publishers want to control the products that we buy. And realistically, a lot of these publishers don't even understand gaming. Now, obviously, at the end of the day, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, realistically, at least to me, even though I do play games, obviously, it's just a video game, and coming from the perspective of the publisher, that's how they look at it. They think it's just a video game. They think it's just, just a temporary thing, and they don't understand what art is. And so, would you go to an art museum, and like the art, imagine if you created art, and you put it up, or basically you're a publisher of the art, and then you got the artist developing that art and put it up, and because it's not selling anymore, or because you found better art, imagine going and destroying the art before, just to have everybody buy the new art. Imagine that. Think about that. You want to go to an art museum and destroy art, right? Because art is not supposed to be destroyed. Ask yourself this, actually. Obviously, I will state, shout out to Quintheo, shout out to Stop Killing Games, and shout out to Accursed Farms. All three videos will be linked down in the description. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video. I will be throwing in a few clips here and there. I'm mostly just talking out of a venting stage of events as this is going on, and trying to implore people to push for this. Continuing. Imagine if you bought a car from a friend or a close relative, and I've used this example many times in my videos before in the past. You bought that car, but the problem is even though you paid full price for that car, there's a gimmick that happens, and it's the same thing with products. You go and you're excited. You go to the car, the keys are missing. You ask like, hey, what happened to the keys? Oh, you bought a license to the car. You just don't own the car. Well, I bought the car. Well, yes, but you don't own the car. Think about it. You bought the car to have the car to go to work. So in this instance, you have to go up to the individual that you bought the car from and grab the keys. You can't just have the keys in your place. You can't, no, because you don't actually own that car. You have to ask permission for the product that you bought. That's what's going on with this entire situation. This has never been a problem before in the past because publishers in the past had no reason to control your stuff because not everything was online. When you went out and you bought a product, it was fully on the disc. It was fully on the cart. Old games back in the day used to contain the full entire contents. Nowadays, especially newer titles, don't even contain that. There's a lot of games that are dropping as of lately physically on the PlayStation 5 and especially Xbox, because Xbox is particularly notorious for not containing the entire contents, especially the system itself. So in a sense, you don't actually own anything you buy anymore. Sending ourselves back in the time when this all started, obviously when the Stop Killing Games kicked off, Ubisoft exec stated, we're seeing an expansion on console as like PlayStation, Xbox, bring new people in on PC. From Ubisoft's standpoint, we're already been great. One of the things we saw and gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD and having to own their games, that's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable with not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that has been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose any of your progress. Oh, yeah, sure. If you resume a game from another time, your progress file will still be there. That has not been deleted. You don't lose what you have built in the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. I still have 2 boxes of DVDs. Yeah, sure. Definitely understand gamers' perspective. No, you don't. But as people embrace that model, they will see that these games will exist. The service will continue. I'm sure it will. And you will be able to access when you feel like. That's reassuring. So, not really particularly a ideal way to actually represent yourself towards the audience when you are doing the complete opposite. So, Ubisoft as a whole is against the game preservation. I know, for obviously, the Crew 2 got its offline mode because, and I will be talking about the crew in general because there's a team. If I haven't mentioned this in my past videos, I think I have. The Crew Unlimited team has revived the first one, and what ended up happening was Ubisoft got their arm twisted. Think about that. It took a group of people, like almost everybody, to twist their arm to implement an offline mode for the Crew 2. They got Ubisoft, got scared, dialed back a little bit, implemented a offline mode for the Crew 2. Now, hadn't been we didn't even say anything, this would have never happened. Think about that. It took a crew, okay? It took a crew of people. We're a crew. We work together. The whole point of this is to work together, not to sit back and think it's a failure just because we lost one battle. We have many battles to fight.
To kind of start things off, what exactly happened at the EU Parliament for people that may not know? Like, what exactly went down that has led to this kind of hitting headlines?
Well, that's a great place to start because the EU Commission and the EU Parliament are 2 different things. And I think that's what maybe a lot of people aren't aware of. So I'm guessing you're referring to the EU Commission, like the answer from a couple days ago,
Yes.
Okay, what they said was this was a response to the initiative, like the one where, if you get 1 million signatures, you submit it to the EU Commission, and then they decide whether they should submit this to Parliament and then have that go through the process to become law or not. So what happened a day or 2 ago is that they looked at it and they decided, okay, no, we're not going to submit legislation on this. So it's effectively a rejection of it. There's lots of nuance to it, though we might get into. Now, if that had been all we were doing, this would be end of the road, but it is so not. In fact, we've sort of anticipated this is coming for a little under a year. Prior to that, I did not. What's going to happen now is we're going to, because we've gained so much support in Parliament, they're on our side on this. We have majority support. So it's going to get introduced into what's called the Digital Fairness Act, which covers other issues. But just by coincidence, ours is almost a perfect fit for this. Parts of the Digital Fairness Act even talk about video games to some extent. They're acting like a roadblock, and normally it would be a much bigger roadblock because I only learned this recently. Apparently, EU Parliament is the only parliament in the world that cannot submit legislation. It can only amend it. So normally you have to go through the EU Commission in order to get new law. But because the Digital Fairness Act already went through, we can kind of get in that way.
Let me get this straight then. So you're saying that the SKG initiative's already kind of gotten some backing with EU Parliament. What kind of led into that? I hadn't heard of that.
Okay, well, you can thank most of that on another person you probably see involved with this, Moritz Katzner. He's making all these inroads with Parliament. He works with a whole team of people too, basically just going and doing the legwork of talking to the different members of Parliament. He's a political insider to the degree we're lucky to have him. Like I
Sure.
I wouldn't even know like a tenth of the stuff he does about internal EU politics, and he's really been helping out on that. Yeah, recently there was actually a letter by Parliament. I can maybe give you, I give you a link to, that was signed by 45 members basically saying to the commission that this is an issue and you should submit new legislation on it. Just recently, we've even had an inquiry call on legislative action to the commission, signed by 45 members of European Parliament. And collectively, we have majority support on this issue. This means we're in a position to pass legislation on this, even without the commission's blessing. It's more than just those 45 members because it represents a lot of party support also. We have majority support. As I understand it, everything's set to go through to submit this through Parliament.
Okay, so I mean that's incredible news.
Yeah.
What does the timeline look for something like that?
Okay, I believe the vote on it is going to be in October, and after that, it has to get sorted out. What are called the trilogues between the EU Commission, the EU Council, and EU Parliament. Now, for that, if EU Council and EU Parliament are in agreement, then the Commission doesn't really have any influence on that. They're there for kind of settling disputes between the two. And we've been making inroads on on EU Council also. As for the timetable, I'm not sure when that would get resolved. But I mean, I'm assuming sometime in the first half of the next year. But the vote by Parliament, which I believe is in October.
Okay, yeah. I genuinely didn't know most of that. That is insane to hear. So, okay, I'm seeing all the headlines, SKG, like it is truly like a very negative association with everything that has been happening. But from, what you're describing, we're already kind of past the point of the EU Commission being vital to the game plan to make any of this happen. It just, you have worked with people that have already essentially gotten into discussions with EU Parliament. You're already saying there's like a majority lead with being able to potentially make this actually go through an amendment of what's already there.
Yeah, we've essentially routed around the EU Commission on this because we kind of suspected this was coming. We had to give the benefit of the doubt up until they made their decision, but we didn't want to wait until it's too late since we were anticipating a negative one. Yeah, I actually had a video on this a couple days prior to the announcement, but I guess not that many people saw it, so or not enough.
Well, I'll
because
be sure
I'm seeing the narrative stop killing games. Okay, but here, let's run through a few scenarios though. Let's say even this goes down in flames, like the Digital Fairness Act. I think we're in a good position for it, but there could be some complications on that. If that were to happen, just speaking for EU legislation, that would set us back for sure. But there's also I think there's reform coming to intellectual property law that we'd be a good fit for. And there's, I think, a revision to the Digital Content Directive coming up at some point. But that would push it back. And on top of that, there's also the legislation going on in California, which that I see as more precarious, but so far so good on that.
Oh, now I did see that too. Go ahead and finish your thought, but I might want to touch on that.
The other thing is, this is all for introducing new legislation. See, the practice that's going on with publishers effectively disabling games in some countries is so egregious, it's actually already kind of violating existing laws, except it's a little fuzzy because the laws were never written for that situation. Like I've compared it before to when Uber came on the scene, like governments weren't sure if these are like taxis or not, or these employees or contractors. There's nothing that directly fits it, but what is on the books definitely doesn't look great for the game industry the more you dive into it.
Sure.
So with that, that's what we needed. What we kicked off with that was, when Ubisoft shut down the game, The Crew, we were essentially using that as a vessel to move things forward on that front at consumer protection agencies. And we were able to advance that in France, Germany, and Australia. The verdict is still out on all of them, which is actually a decent sign, because if they were just going to say that, no, this is completely legal, we can't help you, they could have done that by now, because it's been like 2 years. I think what's happening is they are unraveling what a legal mess this all is and the way the industry has been acting, and are trying to sort it out. But even before that, in France, their consumer protection agency, 𝙎𝙖 Ensemble, they recently renamed it. They've opened up a lawsuit against Ubisoft on this exact issue. So I think they're probably going to win on some level. It's a question of how it plays out. But not only could that establish that it's essentially open season, at least in France, on other companies that do this sort of thing, but that could probably go through it'll almost certainly go through the appeals process. But then after that, it could get bumped to the European Court of Justice, in which case they could look at it and decide, kind of close the book on how legal this is. And if they decide it's not, that could be open season on a lot of games if people wanted it to.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, way more than I honestly expected. You had mentioned earlier that there were different countries where this might, be running into this is actually a bit illegal. Do you have any examples of that, for instance?
Yeah, most EU ones, because if you look at like the way it works in the EU is the EU will give like the general laws and directives, and then it's up to the individual countries to determine how to implement that in their own legal systems. So under EU directives, even the Commission has said, see, there's some protections already for customers. And we had to ask, which ones apply to video games, especially online ones? And one of the ones they mentioned was one called Directive 9313 EEC, I have it memorized now, which it basically protects consumers against unfair terms and contracts, especially mass-produced ones, like game license agreements. And under that, there's probably multiple things in many game license agreements that are likely breaking the law, except nobody's really brought attention to it. But the big one we're focused on is publishers. Almost every online game that's not a subscription service has some language saying something like, we can terminate the game at any time for any reason. And it's very unlikely that's going to be considered a fair term under this directive, which is what the courts will be looking at and then implement it in their own countries. So I'd say France is going to be the big one. I think they're going to be first in the door on this because because Ubisoft is a French company and they've been sort of the catalyst for making all this happen. So,
well, and historically speaking, France has the most fervent population in terms of making change. So that's also great.
Yeah. I actually suspect both Germany and Australia, they might be waiting to see what France does first because they don't want to be first. So I get the feeling that's part of it. But
okay, with that, kind of jumping back to something you had mentioned earlier in regard to how this might end up shaking down with the buy-in that you already have from Parliament. You can't use the EU Commission because they've, denied it effectively. But the thing that you can do is work with them to amend a policy that already exists or amend legislation that already exists. You had said that you have...
Or pending, yeah.
Or pending, right. You had said that you have a place you can carve out aside one of the pieces that you were talking about earlier. Could you elaborate on what that part is specifically and how you can kind of fit in with an amendment with the Stop Killing Games initiative?
Oh, well, let me pull it up. So what would we be adding, or what does it already cover?
What does it already cover, and then
how you fit in there. Give me a moment, I'll pull it up. So the big things it covers are dark patterns and online interfaces. So in other words, let's say you wanted to quit a subscription for something, but they were making it like a real pain in the ass for you to find out where the option is, right, because they want to keep you on the hook. It would be stuff like that. Addictive design of digital services that pushes consumers to keep using the service or spending more money, such as gambling-like features in video games. See, that's the one that should be scaring the hell out of the industry, not us. We're cheap to solve our problem.
Well, I thought Overwatch ran into that situation with this, like the gambling-like features.
Yeah, and see, they mentioned earlier, that's the theme behind the Digital Fairness Act, is they're looking for digital issues where there's already law in the books that sort of covers it, but they say, I'm quoting here, the effectiveness of EU consumer protection is undermined by insufficient enforcement, legal uncertainty, increasing risk of regulatory fragmentation across the member states, and the lack of incentive for businesses to aim for the highest standard of protection. So when you look at our issue, it's all those things, because nobody's completely sure how to handle this. Businesses are not aiming to a high standard on this. It needs sorting out. Let's see. Difficulties with managing digital subscriptions. Oh, okay. So I was mixing things up with the dark pattern, or maybe they overlap. For example, when companies make it excessively hard to unsubscribe.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So wait, what were the dark pattern examples? They say that can unfairly influence their decision, for example, by putting unnecessary pressure on consumers through false urgency claims.
They've also shown, I think Call of Duty was used as an example, where they will have cosmetics in the shop or something for you to purchase.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
when you go to purchase their virtual currency, they will have just under the amount that you need. Like the $20 package gives you just a little bit less than what you need. And then you need to purchase additional in order to get the thing.
Yeah, and the gun you want is like 21.
Right.
So you can buy it in increments of 20. Yeah, that was another one I was thinking of. So it sounds like this whole thing is to nail down issues that are sort of falling between the cracks of existing laws because they're not spelled out enough.
Sure.
And that's us. Like, it's just a coincidence we're a good fit for it, but we'll take it, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that makes sense as to why you would be able to kind of hitch right on this, so to speak. It just kind of falls in line directly with what's already there.
Yeah, and ours would be, you know, when companies disable the games, they need to provide like some means to continue playing the game. That's the basic version. There's, of course, like dozens of nuances, but
right. This makes so much more sense now as to, because I mean, there were a lot of people that were like, oh, it's just copium now about like what to do and whatnot. But
I realize I have limited reach, but I released a video a couple days prior explaining, don't worry about it. Like the first sentence is, I'm saying that like, this is really not going to determine how it goes. And then I kind of went to the history of how it played out and then explained at the end that, you know, we've already been working with Parliament. I showed the letter that like the 45 Parliament members signed on screen. So
I will link your video in the description because that's incredible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it predates the decision. We thought there was a high chance this was coming because they've been giving signals on this. Well, one of the bigger ones that we got when we were in July last year, when we were still collecting signatures, there was a leak by the EU Commission that they took down in a few hours. But this news agency got a hold of it and made an article on it before they did. And in it, they basically said what they did. They basically broadcasted ahead of time saying that, yeah, we're just going to have a non-binding communication and not introduce legislation on it. And this is before we even had a chance to present our evidence, you know, or they talked to us. We were still getting signatures. And they already released this, and then they probably realized, oh, whoops, we did this a little too early. We better,
oh my gosh,
we better take it down to make it look like we're listening to people, and then show it up. You know,
that's insane. I didn't.
Yeah,
hear
I'll give a link to that article.
Please do
pull that article up too. So it doesn't go into too many details, but that was the best intel we had at the time, and we had no reason to doubt them, and it turned out being completely prophetic. So
it's disheartening to know that they had already made their decision, which is kind of insane and defeats the purpose of the EU Commission. But at the same time, it was like the signatures and doing all of that. Maybe a lot of people put the eggs in the basket of this needs to be in front of the EU Commission. But in reality, it turned into a ton of movement in every other direction, and arguably in every other direction that has meant a lot more for actual success with Stop Killing Games and actually having an impact.
Yeah, well, sort of, because if the EU Commission was on board, that would have been amazing, you know.
Sure.
But and hey, I got it wrong myself about from roughly 1 to 2 years ago, because I thought I mentioned before this is kind of a mess in itself that, you know, the law doesn't exactly define this. So even if the commission was against us, in my mind, I thought, okay, well, they need to at least clarify the law. Because if we're coming in with over 1 million people saying, hey, can you please resolve this? Even if we don't like the resolution, they need to spell it out. But the thing is, they still haven't done that. Like, I've been kind of looking through the answer. They'll mention laws, but then if you go through the law, it's like it still doesn't answer the question. It's the same problem again. And actually, in my opinion, from my limited knowledge on this, the political people are saying the same thing, could probably speak more authoritatively to it, but they're not doing their job, not because they're not agreeing with us, and actually not even because they're saying let the courts figure it out by itself, but because part of the EU's job is to is what's called to harmonize the EU policy across the different countries, so that you don't have one country saying, okay, these kinds of games are illegal, and the other saying, no, this is fine, everybody can have them, that sort of thing. Because then it kind of fragments the market, and that creates problems for publishers in the industry and that sort of thing. They want to know where they stand across the EU.
Right.
So by kicking this to the courts, saying, oh yeah, let them figure it out, that's when we have so many people saying, yeah, please resolve this or at least clarify it. That's kind of them not doing their job. And as I understand it, that's adding fuel to the fire for Parliament, because Parliament doesn't like this, even if they don't really care about our issue, or some of them, because this makes them all look bad. Because
you're not doing your job.
Yeah, exactly. When you get all these people to go out of their way to say, hey, please address this, and then you just dodge it, that's not a good look. And like at the beginning, a lot of people mix up the commission with Parliament and think it's all the same thing. So that kind of further creates a worse image for them.
Guilty. Yeah. My mistake with my assumption here, it seems that their willingness to at least attempt to kick the can down the road is kind of at the very least expediting one part of this, that they do need to clarify this information.
I would say, I mean, maybe it's something I'm not foreseeing, but if we were to go like the absolute longest road on this, like let's say every new legislation just got shot down one way or the other, I think once it finally made it to the European High Court of Justice, they would look at the laws and realize, yeah, this actually does violate the way these are operating, it does violate this directive. And then they would tell the commission, hey, you kicking it to us, you can't do that. You have to you have to clarify this based on our ruling. You're not doing your job. So I think in some ways they really are kicking the can down the road, but it is going to come back at them. The question is how fast, I guess.
Sure.
Let's go through like a negative outcome,
sure,
but they're still doing their job. What they would have to have done is say, okay, we think this goes too far, but, consumers have these existing protections, but, these really don't apply to video games because they contain all these different copyrighted elements, and that overrides this directive. So consumers effectively have no rights on this issue. Sorry, but that's just how it is. If they had framed it like that, that would have sucked, but they would have been doing their job. But they didn't do that. They didn't clarify it, and they're basically trying to pass the buck to the courts, which you can do that on some things where it's understood essentially what the guidelines are, but it's not. In fact, that's something we brought up. If you go through the European Consumer Centers Network, which is what you're supposed to do if you have a dispute if you're in Europe and have a dispute with another country, they're supposed to resolve it. When we did that with the crew, with lots of volunteers, the overwhelming answer was they didn't know what to do. They said there was no clear regulation on this. So that it's like screaming that this is the EU Commission's responsibility to resolve at least this part of it.
Right. Even with that, though, this isn't just your assumptions leading you to these conclusions about EU needs to, like, the Commission needs to resolve this. It's their responsibility. Like, this is you also hearing this, like this isn't just your hypothesis. The person that has been working with you, working with these politicians, making those three roads, like you mentioned earlier, like
there's actually a part in like the EU charter or somewhere that mentions this. I unfortunately don't remember which one off the top of my head, but
you're totally
like if you were to talk to like somebody pretty familiar with EU law or a political expert, they could explain this better than I could, especially if you talked about like fragmentation of EU policy or harmonization, that sort of thing.
Okay, awesome. So then what are, like, as of right now, and maybe this is also just involved in your video that I'm going to be linking, but the next few steps are just kind of getting things prepared for that October debut that you had mentioned?
Yeah, and yeah, I think those are the main ones. Also, we're kind of operating at two fronts with California too, so we have to see if we can get that through the state senate.
So you are working in part with that.
Yeah, there's like a U.S. NGO that we're definitely in communication with. It's definitely like a big cooperative effort. So
Okay.
it's not like any one person is running things on that.
Right. And to clarify with that, so the California law, what specifically were the parameters surrounding that? And like, has something actually been passed, or was it just moving the bill up?
It's moving the bill up right now. It's made it through the state assembly, and now it's at the state senate. With what it says could mutate or might get, it's gotten. Yeah, it's been both hardened and softened in the process. So it can mutate a little bit. They definitely consult me to ask like what would be like acceptable compromises versus ones that would just be would be so ineffective we may as well not be doing anything. So far it stayed intact. Like the way it's softened so far was originally it was going to cover games being sold past the certain date it goes into effect. It's since been modified to grandfather in all existing games. So this will be only like completely new games released past that date, which protects less games, but hey, it's still a win in the long term. That's
right.
Kind of what I'm looking at it. Well, actually, there's one change in there. It's not really against it, but I want to make sure it's like explicitly added. They'll make it easier, better for both sides. Would be, say it's a game, it's an online game you pay money for, but the server, there's just no way it can run on the platform that the client was for. A concrete example would be Titanfall for the Xbox 360. Now that would be exempt because it gets grandfathered in, but let's say you had something like that.
Sure.
Whereas, as I understand it, like the Xbox 360 literally can't even process all the physics of that. So a whole bunch of the physics is processed server side. So what we want to make sure it spells out that if you were to, sunset a game like that, you wouldn't be required to make that game run in its entirety on the Xbox 360. Instead, what it would have to do would be to at least allow the client to point to a different address and then release probably the server software for it. We wouldn't specify the exact solution because we have to keep that open, but which that server software might be meant for like just some Linux server. So you might need to you'd be on your own for getting that server working again, but it would be possible to run that again. So we want to make sure that's understood that that's an acceptable solution because we don't, because otherwise they'd have to recode the entire game. And we want this to be as easy as possible.
Give them the tools, essentially.
Basically, that's the metric. Like, is it impossible to run the game? If yes, then it's not good enough. If the answer is no, but it's a pain in the ass, then that's probably still okay.
Right. So, and again, like that still comes down to niche examples, like what you're saying. Titanfall, just the physics not running.
I think a lot of them, they might just decide, hey, you know what? We're just going to patch this and make it peer-to-peer hosting and then just call it a day. It all depends on how the game is architectured. So we want it to be easy for them to take the path of least resistance.
And if this ends up getting instated, is that just for California then?
That would be just for California. However, there is action for more states pending. I don't know exactly which ones yet.
Totally okay. But I just wanted to clarify
I would say California is probably the crown jewel on this because there's plenty of games where if you look at the license agreement in the US, it says if you have a dispute, it will be settled in California, regardless of what state you live in.
Oh.
Like the way it is now, they're basically able to circumvent state law on a lot of these games. So California it would be my number one choice were to have this. We don't have to have every last state to win on this. We just need to get like significant market share.
Sure.
Really, I think even the United States is a lot rougher to do this in because the law is there's simply a lot less consumer protections. I really kind of see this stuff as a bonus to the EU action. Like if we can get the EU or maybe Australia, it's hard to say, but kind of quiet from them for a while. I think this would be complementary because once we get a big enough market, I think we largely solve the problem globally. Because if companies know they have to have an end-of-life plan to sell the game in the EU, when it comes time to have that and implement it, they'll probably just roll it out globally because the work will have already been done on it.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, technically they wouldn't have to. If they, like, let's say this only passed in France, they could just say everybody else can go to hell, but France gets to keep playing the game. Keep playing the game. They could do that, but it wouldn't be worth it for the PR, and it would just, at that point, it's so easy to just roll it out globally.
Right.
So.
Okay, I gotta say, compared to a year ago, your handle on talking about the politics of it and like just being able to get a majority and stuff is very different, and it's really interesting to hear and see like the difference.
I'm always playing catch up on that. Like I don't like pretty much since from the time we got the signatures, I've more or less been following orders from the people who know what the hell they're doing in terms of the politics. Because my function was more to just, can we get attention on this? And again, I naively thought that because this is a gray area in the law, if we're just, shouting, please resolve this, the commission will go, okay, well, fine, we'll resolve this one way or another. Turns out, no, they'll still dodge it, even when you have 1 million people saying, please do your job. But thankfully, like you mentioned earlier, this has raised attention elsewhere with Parliament. We've been able to make other inroads, like with the US NGO and that sort of thing. So thankfully it's working out.
Naively or not, like you were expecting Parliament, or excuse me, the EU Commission to effectively do its job. So
yes,
if that's naivety,
that.
No.
Well, part of my strategy did depend on that. The part with the consumer protection agencies and the courts, that's still going as planned. So at least I got that part right so far.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't kind of covered that you want to make sure gets like put out, included in this? Just to
geez, I should have thought of that. We still have, I guess we have like half a dozen ways we can win on this. I think we are going to win in the long term. I have no idea which one's going to do it though, because the slowest one is probably the most surefire way to do it, which is through the courts. But that'll also be the most disruptive. But yeah, just I think we're going to win on this. It's just a question of when and how.
Okay, so I guess really quick then, for example, let's say the vote in October goes kaput. What is any other kind of direction going? Just kind of like what you had mentioned with the fact that France, Australia, Germany are also kind of looking into this.
Yeah, but those are going to take a while. Like even that lawsuit that's already started, those will be years for sure.
Okay.
Well, I guess California would probably be the next on the timeline. If that were to go down, also there'd be the other states, though. I think that would be weaker if we don't have California. I would say the next item up for legislative action would probably be, geez, I don't even know which comes up first, but probably either the intellectual property law reform or the digital content directive reform, probably one of those. But I think those would probably also be a couple of years. So yes, if it fails, that does set us back a couple of years, but all this other stuff's still in line to go. Like I've kind of looked at this campaign the whole time. Like, in fact, I'm kind of sticking with it a hell of a lot longer than I wanted to. But I kind of was looking at it like we're launching rockets off, and then past that point, we're just ground control, and it's the people in government are the pilots, essentially determining where this goes. And that's kind of how it is for a lot of this stuff, like the lawsuits or like what France's Consumer Protection Agency does. We don't have a say on that at this point. It's all in their hands, and they're just going to determine, is the law being broken or not? If so, how? What are the penalties for this? That sort of thing. So that's out of our hands now, but it's underway.
I think I think the most important thing is, like, when it comes down to them piloting it, is you put so much attention with Stop Killing Games Initiative onto the fact that these decisions do matter to millions of people, that it's going to get them to, to some degree, there is that part of like, well, we're playing for voters. And if you're going to make such negative, sweeping decisions that are be like, well, no, you don't really have rights in this situation, it's not going to bode well for them come voter season.
Yeah, that's really been reflected in Parliament. And even ones that, don't play games. When I was there, some of them talked to me and they said, like, yeah, but their kids do. And like, they didn't want to, like some of them said they didn't want to think about what would happen if like Fortnite were to go down or something like that.
So funny. Yeah, that's a way to connect to them too. That's so good.
I mean, again, I can understand plenty of people aren't into games, but they can understand like basic consumer rights. Like, you could apply the same logic to something like books or music or something. Like, you bought it, you want to be able to keep it. And the thing is, they sometimes try to slip out of this by framing it like, oh, it's just a service. Like, oh, if you got a ticket to an amusement park, you don't expect to keep the park or something like that. It's like, okay, well then, when does it end? When you get a ticket to amusement park, they tell you when the park closes, when your ticket expires. And that's kind of the case for almost every service out there. Either they tell you exactly when it ends, or there's a customer expectation. Like, you don't know if your haircut's going to last 20 minutes or an hour if you talk a lot or something, but you have a rough idea.
But it's also a false comparison because it didn't start as an amusement park ticket. It started as a hardcover case with a CD in it that had the game contents that were given to you, and there was no shutoff date because it was impossible for them to. They were delivering the full game.
This is where you start getting into the weeds on it. But sure. I mean, you could have stuff like that for like, let's say you bought a phone card, like a phone plan card where you get like 60 minutes of use. It's like, that's still a tangible thing, but it is kind of intended as like a service, and they tell you when it expires, after your 60 minutes. I mean, we obviously see them. The only games we really see as services, and even then we would like to preserve them if we could, but there's not really the provisions for them under consumer law. It would be, it's like subscription ones, kind of like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14, where you pay your 30 days or your 6 months, and then that's it. You're cut off unless you pay it again.
Right.
Everything else, they're not telling you when they're going to disable it, and they're not letting you keep it. So that practice, the thing is, that kind of protects them under U.S. law, saying they can do all this, but it's a double-edged sword that works against them in the EU, because the harder they go on that, the more unfair it looks, which starts brushing up against laws protecting against that sort of thing.
Sure. So I guess my head goes to like Spyro, and the game's like, you are purchasing and that's it. Like they can't cut off your ownership of the game. Like you have it in your possession. Spyro exists as long as the console that you're able to play it on, it works, as long as the video game disc itself would work. And so in my head, it was like, well, they're transitioning from what used to be, I would say conceptually, you own the game. There's no, we can't take it back from you because you have the hardware to run this. To it, it morphed as soon as we moved into an online ecosystem for games. That's when the licensing stuff showed up, and to me that was like, well, that's a bit deceptive for the the consumers of video games. It has switched to a way that they just lose their ownership of said thing, when that never used to be the case, or not as common.
Yeah, and again, it gets, there's almost like not language for what's going on, because you mentioned ownership. What we're really talking about is sort of like an aspect of ownership, because like even like for a digital game, if let's say you buy one that's no DRM, you can kind of keep it as long as you want. You can back it up. Well, you're still not allowed to resell that copy, or they might. I mean, I don't think it should be there, but not for this, but for, let's say you mod it. They could crack down on a mod for it if they wanted to. Thankfully, a lot of them don't. But so
it's like monetizing mods is when they get.
Yeah, if you can't do all that, that's not really full ownership. So we're just talking about you get to retain the copy of the game that you paid for. And you talk about deception. I mean, I actually think that's a minority of it, the people who are just truly blindsided by this. I think most gamers kind of know that this doesn't get to last, but because like you mentioned, that Spyro game, you can play it till the end of time as long as the disc stays in good shape,
Right.
So it's kind of like sneaky predatory in that sense. So we're just focusing on the fact that this is just kind of consumer hostile.
Right.
Okay, you don't get to keep it, and you're not given any information about when it's going to end. It's apply that to anything else. Like, you mentioned cars, but like, or just even services like an insurance policy. Okay, yeah, you bought an insurance policy, not for a year, not for 2 years, just for whenever we decide it's going to end.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you're making a good point about deception is more so how it feels, but it's really the frog in the pot of boiling water.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had it like one way for so long that when the transition happened over to the online space versus having mainly, hard copies of it, you just didn't really feel it until it was shown up in your face. Like The Crew was, I guess, a great breakout example of it, of like, oh my gosh, there are so many people that are recognizing that they don't actually own the game. And I think that was like the largest wake up call for me in particular about oh, no, you own a license. You do not own the game like you quote unquote owned the game back then. Like, you made a good point. You can't, they could crack down on modifying. They can crack down on these different aspects. I never even thought of that.
I mean, even licenses, that's not an excuse for the behavior, really. I mean, you could ask for your firstborn child in a license. That doesn't make it legal. So what really animates me about all this is I just hate seeing creative works like games destroyed. And this is the sort of vessel that it's happening under. And it's just sort of a lucky coincidence that it's also a consumer rights issue that has a lot more teeth with consumer law on it. Because if it was just preservation, we wouldn't be able to get very far. But because this is so hostile to consumers also, then that's why we're able to push as far as we have.
With that, was there anything else that you wanted to share? I think we kind of touched on a lot.
I guess, well, if you're in California, it will not hurt there's, I don't have a link handy. I should have. There's a page to find your state senator that you can contact and just let them know you support AB 1921 is the name of it, or just tell them the one that protects video games.
Shoot me a link.
Yeah, actually, it's called the Protect Our Games Act, POG Act.
Protect. Are you serious?
I am serious. I didn't come up with that, but that's, like I said, it's a team effort. Somebody liked that idea.
That's amazing. Yeah, send me the link. I'll throw it in the description of the video, and I'll have a pinned comment mentioning it.
Just because we failed one battle against the EU with the situation doesn't mean we should give up. Why do you get up in the morning? Do you just simply give up on getting up in the morning? No, you keep trying. That's the whole point. You know what I've always thought about, and the reason why I keep going to this day, even though I've had many, like, this is going to be a dark, context, I guess. But I have had many times of given up on life, if you know what I mean. I've literally wanted to many times, but I'm still here. I'm still fighting through. Life is a bitch. But do you just give up? No, you keep going. The whole point of winning is failing. If you fail, you win. If you win, you fail, vice versa. It doesn't matter. The whole point is when you fail, you become stronger. It just basically, you become immune to the bullshit that happens and you keep going. And so when it comes to war, I guess, publishers versus video game preservation, this is a battle that's currently happening. And of course, I can argue that there are worse things to happen in the real world. But when it comes to the Consumer Rights and the Fairness Act and the publisher taking from the consumer, I think that's illegal. In my opinion, it's stealing from the consumer. As I stated with the car or the book, you guys get it. So pursuing and pushing forward, even after a setback like this, it's not going to weaken you. It's just going to strengthen you. Listen. I haven't really talked about Stop Killing Games for a while because realistically, I know that we can do this. And I don't typically like to talk about this stuff, but I really want people to actually understand that you can't just let these publishers control the products that you buy. I mean, listen, I like my game preservation. I had a whole channel before it got shut down because apparently it was promoting piracy when it was not. Piracy is deemed such a negative thing when that's the only damn reason why game preservation even exists in the first place, is because these publishers don't have control over the product. If the product is downloaded rather than purchased, they want to have more control over that product. They want to stick DRM inside every single video game that is, even on consoles nowadays, you're running into that issue. So we need to continue pushing forward. Don't let like a small gap destroy the progress we've made so far. It's the only thing it's doing is strengthening, okay? And this goes with everything in life. If you think about it, like imagine getting bullied constantly in high school. Did that just make your life worse? Did you just grow to just to be weak? No. You grew stronger from being bullied. Same thing here. Same situation here. These cocksuckers are just nothing but bullies, and they want to control everything you buy. They want to control everything that you have. They want to build a subscription model out of computers. They want to build a subscription model out of games. They want everything to be connected to the internet. And if you think about it, imagine, you know what? I know this is going to be blatant, out of mind and out of pocket, but at the end of the day, you pull the power on everything, it doesn't matter in the end. What matters is commitment and strength and pushing through and taking ownership. It's that simple. I don't think you want another person on another computer controlling the product that you purchase for your computer. I think if you purchase a product, it should be fully on your computer, not another person's computer. Think of how weird that would be. And I know the whole power thing was just out of pocket, but I just wanted to bring that as an example. The point being is, you should have control over the product you bought. Think of how weird it would be that you bought a video game just for another person to control how you access that game. Isn't that weird? Isn't that I mean, it goes the same way with buying a car. You bought that car fully, but then somebody else has control over the product, over that car you bought. It's the same thing. It makes you feel a little jaded, makes you feel a little bit upset that you can't have your own life. You have somebody else controlling your life. You don't want other people controlling your life. Like, what's the, like, why are you still here? Obviously, why are you still? Because you mean something. You mean something to the world. So why should you be obligated to give up your personal stuff to somebody else? Imagine if a lot of these publishers, yeah, I mean, they're all humans at the end of the day. Think about that. They go home, and imagine if they get on their stuff, whatever they bought, and they're in the mindset of, like, you know, it doesn't matter, it's a subscription. What happens if that gets taken away from them? What happens if they lose access to that stuff? What happens if they lose access to their consumer base? Think about it. The whole reason why a lot of these publishers still gain more control is over money. People continue buying these games. People continue supporting these subscriptions, these practices, and publishers think they can get away with it. What happens if we stop buying games from them? What happens if we just don't support at all? They're not going to do anything at all. Nothing's going to scare them more than losing money on something. Nothing's going to make them change their mind. And if you think about it, if everybody on the face of the it just, like I stated, it takes a crew to make a difference. If you stop supporting these publishers, they will dial back. Money is what they're living on. Money is where the greed comes from. Money is where the control comes from. They want control over. They want consumers to continue purchasing products. The reason why they take from the consumer is because they have control over that. They can do that. The reason why the crew got shut down is because everybody was having fun playing the crew. And my honest opinion, I as much as I love the crew too, as much as I love the Crew Motorfest, everybody was playing the crew because it was actually a good game, and it still is. And Ubisoft did not like that, so there was a lot of people still playing the crew. That really just burned everybody, including me. For the longest time, I cannot play that game at all. It took a entire team called the Crew Unlimited team to revive that game, and it took a full crew of people to twist Ubisoft's arm into making an offline mode for the Crew 2. So it's going to take a whole crew to vote with our wallets and to make the changes, because like, our voices will never be heard It takes action. It takes strength. It takes dignity to make the choice. It's just they're run. These publishers, a lot of these companies run on money. We have the money. We don't give the money. They listen. That's all. That's what does it. That's what hurts the most. Is if we vote with our wallets. And yes, of course, voting with signatures. Obviously, link down to description with everything. So, at the end of the day, we have a secret weapon. We haven't used it yet. And that secret weapon is always going to be our wallets. So, it doesn't take... It just... I guarantee you, and I know I'm bringing this up again, but I guarantee you, we stop purchasing these subscription models. We stop purchasing these games. And in line, we make our voices heard as well, because obviously communication's key to everything. We communicate that we do not support not owning our stuff, so we vote with our wallets. And I guarantee you, everybody does this stuff. Everybody states this and actually votes with our wallets. I guarantee you, in about a week, things start changing. It takes a crew to make this happen. Now, obviously, when it comes to GOG, when it comes to a lot of publishers that actually fall in suit with actually making sure the user owns the game, that's when you go to support those publishers. And you know it's crazy to think about it. If they see they see a competition with a lot of these other companies that are actually doing things right, they will fall in suit. They will try to change things to actually get more revenue. GOG makes some revenue quite a lot of the time, but competition isn't really there because a lot of people are purchasing all these services, these subscription models, and they don't understand the DRM aspect of it. GOG is a DRM-free platform. When you buy a game, you actually own the game. You can put it on a hard drive, you can back it up, copy it over onto another computer, and launch the executable and play. That's how it used to be back in the day, even with physical games. All that data was on there. Yes, you had to put the CD inside the I guess console or the computer, whatever you want to call it. You put the media inside the system. All the data is on that disc. All the data is on that card. You have that. You have access to that. Now, obviously, you don't own the rights to the game, but you actually own a copy of the game. Okay, you actually own a copy of the media. So, at the end of the day, our secret weapon is our wallets. We will win. We will take ownership back, and we will continue fighting. Please push for this. Everything's linked down in the description. Do not think that because of the EU commissioner or anything. Don't think of it as a push. Think of it as ammunition. Okay, you get beat down, you get back up. So I just wanted to at least push for this because I appreciate my stuff I buy. I am fully on board with ownership. I like owning my stuff. I'm very much, and particularly, fully on board with owning my stuff. I don't like it when other companies have access to the stuff I buy. I think it's a little weird. I think it's a little icky. I think it's just, it just makes me feel kind of like almost nauseous. I know it's not that exaggerated, but I just feel uncomfortable. I've always been just really weirded out with somebody else controlling my physical game that I bought. So, please, everything linked down in the description. And again, shout out to Accursed Farms, shout out to Stop Killing Games, shout out to you guys for actually helping pushing this far. We've gotten this far, why give up now? Let's just keep going, because realistically, I mean, we'll win. There's no doubt about it. A lot of people don't like the way these laws are being handled, and a lot of other companies are not liking the way publishers are taking from their consumer base, because it's obviously a lot of other places. I mean, think about it. We're gonna win this. It's a good thing that we get. It's a good and even if we get pushed back again, it's just we're getting stronger every single time. And one more time with this, our wallets is the only thing that will make a change. Besides the signatures, besides our voices, our wallets. We got 3 things going on here that we're using, okay? We haven't used the atomic bomb, and that's our wallets, but we've used the other 2 things. Our voices and the signatures. Okay? So, we're a team. We're a crew. Let's make things happen. Get off your asses. Let's do this. I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.